I thought the 3p a mile tax really on EVs is neither here nor there. Everybody knows, you know, they're so much cheaper than petrol and diesels to run. What's 3p per mile? EV residual values declined by 60% between September 2022 and September 2024 and have dropped a further 10% since then, leaving almost all of the first wave of EV contracts in the red. The financial blow has been cushioned by the relative strength of used petrol and diesel prices, but it is requiring the sale of 3 or 4 ICE cars to offset the losses on one single EV. Surely 3p per mile couldn't break the difference between the savings on an EV and running a petrol or diesel. That's what they tell us. They're so cheap to charge. They're in a bit of a panic, aren't they? You know, they've put the wagons in a circle on this one. Just 3p. Now, usual suspect. Promise you, I don't follow this guy. He winds me up with virtually everything he says. Just the name of the firm he works for, the Climate Intelligence Unit, is the biggest oxymoron I've ever come across. I'm going to show you how my brain works. It could scare you. This tweet came up on my timeline from Colin Walker from the Climate Intelligence Unit, November the 26th. I think this is overstating things a tad. EVs will retain a significant running cost advantage over petrol cars when the 3p per mile tax comes in. But they haven't got an advantage now. So how can they retain an advantage that they haven't got? For those that can charge at home, the majority, only just, they'll remain as cheap as 5p per mile to drive compared to 15p per mile for petrol. They will remain as cheap as 5p per mile. What about the petrol ones as cheap? 15p per mile for petrol. But the best example for EVs, then we get a tweet from Marcher at Marcher Reborn. This is on November the 26th. Reeves just wiped out the EV car industry. There's literally no incentive to buy one for the next 10 years. 3p per mile tax on EV cars starting 2028. The all EV vehicle mandate pushed back to 2035. Our analysis has found that the best-selling EVs will be capable of delivering their owners over £1,000 a year in savings when compared to a petrol once the 3p tax comes into effect. Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit analysis. Informed debate on energy and climate change. Snap analysis. EVs still £1,000 cheaper to run with 3p per mile charge. November 6, 2025. Analysis shows that even with a 3p per mile tax reported by media as a possible announcement at the next budget, which has come in, EVs would still be £1,000 cheaper to run per year than petrol cars. By Colin Walker. Analysis by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, ECIU, based on the 10 best-selling EVs of 2024, 1 shows that even with a 3p per mile tax reported by the media as possible announcement at the next budget, EVs would still be £1,000 cheaper to run per year than petrol cars. Many experts are understandably concerned that this could send the wrong signal to drivers thinking of making the switch to EVs, with the government repeating the chopping and changing of EV policies that we saw under the previous administration. EVs are already cheaper to run than petrol cars, and even with a 3p per mile charge, they will still remain over £1,000 a year cheaper to run. Well, that's debatable actually, Colin, but this announcement comes shortly after the government gave in to industry lobbying by weakening its EV sales targets, because nobody was going to hit them. They had no chance. And when you've got no chance, you just give up. This could enable industry to push more hybrids on drivers that burn 5 times more fuel than their manufacturers claim. And yet the chairman of Toyota claims that one EV is dirtier than 3 hybrids. Colin, or the chairman of Toyota. Longer term, it would be expected that all road users make a contribution, but government risks sending mixed signals and undermining consumer confidence by trying to encourage drivers into EVs with one policy and possibly putting them off with another. So Colin, these EV people, if an EV and a petrol car were exactly the same cost to run, what do you think they'd buy? The EV, they'd be saving the planet, but a petrol is more convenient. It's not about saving the planet for them. You go on about climate intelligence, it's not about saving the planet. The first word out of all these EV people's mouths, savings. That's cost. That's all they're interested in. They're not interested in saving the planet. So, if it was a level playing field, no electric vehicles would. I'd buy one. I'd buy a Citroen Ami because it's handy. But having said that, if I could get a Citroen Ami with a little petrol or diesel engine in, trust me, I wouldn't be buying an electric vehicle. Seriously, nobody would. Possibly putting them off with another. The net result could be to keep people stuck in dirtier and more expensive petrol cars for longer. They're not more expensive, Colin. You know they're not. Notes to editors. Or notes to editors who want to reproduce this shite. The analysis calculates the total annual costs of ownership of the best-selling EVs of 2024. Applies a 3 pence per mile cost and compares them with the total cost of ownership of their petrol equivalents. The analysis assumes that the vehicles are being driven for 8,000 miles per year. But that's not true, is it? Because the total cost of ownership includes depreciation. Okay? Not just running costs, depreciation. So let me ask you this. If the leasing companies who don't have running costs, they don't have insurance, they don't have servicing, all they do is get a car from the manufacturers dirt cheap, way less than a private can buy an EV for. Way less. 2 for 1, at least 2 for 1. Some vans 3 for the price of 1. And they're losing money. All they have to suffer is depreciation. They cannot keep up with depreciation. And then all you people say, well, I get my car on a lease. You're getting them off people who are losing money. Because if they charged you the correct amount, you wouldn't buy it. You'd buy petrol because it'd be cheaper. The lease would be cheaper. So what the BVRLA now are doing are lobbying the government for subsidies on used, a grant on used. Where does that fall down? A grant on a used vehicle. You can get a grant on a new vehicle, but a new vehicle is only new once. A used vehicle is a used vehicle every time it sells. At this moment in time, there are used EVs selling within days of people buying them. Some of them are selling 4 and 5 times a year. What do you think dealers will do if they got a grant on a used EV? Yeah? They'd get the grant, wouldn't they? And then they'd put it in somebody else's name. Then they'd get the grant again. And then somebody else's name and get the grant again. Are you thick? Really? Are you? Are you completely stupid? Do you have no idea what goes on in the world? You're sat in your non-profit making business behind your desk. Doesn't matter whether you've not got to make money, you've not got to hit targets, you've just got to come out with drivel like this, and this is drivel. It's absolute drivel. Do you want to know the real truth? This is the BVRLA's solution to reaching the ZEV mandate. The government is phasing out the sale of new cars with a combustion engine from 2030, and someone will have to pay for it. In reality, the deadline is earlier. Between 2027 and 2028, the percentage of OEMs new car sales that have to be zero emissions leaps to 52% from 38%, and credits from future sales or bought from rivals will no longer be sufficient to meet the terms of the mandate. The only solution will either be to sell many more electric cars or substantially reduce sales of fossil fuel cars. Limit the amount of fossil fuel cars you sell so that the electric appears to be more of a percentage. That's a bit like sending Tyson Fury out into a boxing match but tying his arms behind his back. It's not a match, is it? And this is how pathetic the ZEV mandate is. This is how pathetic these EV zealots are coming across. How the lies have been exposed by, they say one thing to privates and in the news, and then another thing, truth. The true story, what you see behind it. Listen to this. Leasing companies are in the eye of this maelstrom, having funded the lion's share of the UK electric vehicles, the biggest EV market in Europe in 2024. The leasing companies are now grappling with a level of depreciation far greater than they forecast. Because I forecast it. I told them years ago. But the experts couldn't. It was obvious to me what was going to happen. EV residual values declined by 60% between September 2022 and September 2024 and have dropped a further 10% since then, leaving almost all of the first wave of EV contracts in the red. The financial blow has been cushioned by the relative strength of used petrol and diesel prices. But it is requiring the sale of 3 or 4 ICE cars to offset the losses on one single EV. This is the BVRLA who put the name to, what about running costs? Save up to £1,500. They know that's not true. They know that's not true at all.
This is Toby Poston, Motivational Trade Association leader, guardian of corporate reputations, public affairs strategist, delivers powerful research and profitable events, obsessed with delivering member value, former BBC business editor. And you'll see there he's got a sign at the right hand side, BVRLA and Henley Business School. About, with over 10 years of experience at the British Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association, BVRLA, the trade body for the UK's vehicle rental and leasing sector, I am a board level leader. That's not bored as in fed up, although I'm sure he should be. Communicator and public affairs expert. I manage a team of 35 and an annual turnover of 4.5 million. My mission is to inform, inspire and influence the automotive community in meeting the road transport needs of society. That means helping my members to work with government in delivering decarbonisation that provides environmental, societal and economic benefits to all. I have successfully campaigned for policy and regulatory changes worth over 1.5 billion, secured regular meetings with senior government officials and ministers, and coordinated industry input into post-Brexit and COVID-19 challenges and opportunities. I have also launched and grown new corporate functions, developed and motivated high-performing teams, and created new revenue streams and partnerships for the BVRLA. BVRLA, 17 years and 8 months, Chief Executive, full-time, January 2000 to present, 11 months, Amersham, England, United Kingdom. That's Toby outside Downing Street. BVRLA took its hashtag used EV, hashtag happy EV after message to the heart of the government today, briefing the number 10 team on the urgent need to support the used electric vehicle market. What a stupid idea. While many prefer to focus on the positive story of rising used EV sales, swift conversion rates and amazing bargains to be had, because they're depreciated so much, Laxmi Morthy, Nick Williams, Thomas McClellan, Director of Policy and Public Affairs at BVRLA. In another unusual pre-budget development today, there have been stories setting out the specific EV support measures that will be announced next week. In both the measures in the press today and the paper mail rumours, the one group consistently ignored are the EVs already on the road. Unless we see support for used EVs and EV residual values, the transition will become ever more challenging. The BVRLA has been pushing for the used market hard. We really must see nuance as a minimum and preferably tangible actions in what is formally announced on the 26th to help build confidence and energy in the used EV market. Used EV market at 4% with new EVs changing hands within days of being registered and sold as used. Used and new stats being doctored. Used vehicles changing hands several times a year. Used stats being doctored. Catastrophic depreciation on used. Trying to create a market that's not there. And this is affecting residuals on ICE cars too. Because if you think that the dealers who hold 96% of the sales market are going to stand still while EVs buy their customers, you are sadly mistaken. Your ideas are ill-conceived, will ruin the motor trade, and are quite frankly idiotic. The best thing you can do is tell your members to sell EVs to people whose needs they suit and ICE cars to the rest. Grow the EV market organically and tell the government to swivel. Or even better, when they hit their targets and keep their promises, the motor trade will follow suit. You, however, should be ashamed of yourself putting out propaganda to private customers while going cap in hand for grants. Reduced VAT, benefit in kind, manufacturers' discounts, used car grants. To be honest, I've never heard anything so stupid in my life. A grant on a used EV will just knock millions in value off the cars people have already purchased. And it will destroy the motor trade. You are just looking after leasing companies. There will be no motor trade left to supply cars to the leasing companies if the government listened to your brain dead ideas. And I shared a more ominous perspective. We explained the impact of a multi-year collapse in residual values and the damage this is doing to balance sheets, new EV lease inflation and investor confidence across the entire EV transition. There is a lot going on in Downing Street at the moment, so we appreciate them taking the time to listen and ask questions. I am pleased to tell members that they are well aware of the BVRLA and the role played by the fleet and mobility services sector. Rest assured we will be following up on today's conversation. When I saw that, I just thought how absolutely stupid and short-sighted it was to ask for subsidies on used cars when you're getting grants on new vehicles. You know, what do you want? I've already mentioned that a used car can be sold time and time again, and this system is open to abuse, especially among car dealers and especially among leasing companies. Can you imagine them swapping all the vehicles between the leasing companies, for instance, so they get the grant and make them even cheaper? How many times can they do that to dig themselves out of a hole? Because electric cars aren't selling, because they can't charge enough to make electric car leases profitable, because they depreciate too much. How insane. This is my answer to him. Toby, don't forget to tell them that privates can save £1,500 a year by running an EV, but leasing companies lose hundreds of thousands. Perhaps you should ask the government if you can get rid of all the people running the leasing companies and get Joe Private to do it instead. Just a thought. Would save you the embarrassment of begging for subsidies or grants for used EVs and admitting that you have to buy EV sales, and you are quite content to send the motor trade to its doom because your members can't do their jobs properly.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.